Hello, everybody. So, welcome to the Culture Project series, Call to Love, Call to Hope, streaming on Facebook Live Monday through Friday, 12 p.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I am Kiki, and I am with the Culture Project LA team. And
Hi, everyone. My name is Brian Nguyen. I work for the Culture Project here in Philadelphia.
What's good, y'all? My name is Genesis. I am a second-year missionary with the Culture Project, and I am serving on the San Francisco/Pittsburgh team this year.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eric. I'm also a second-year missionary currently serving with the San Francisco-Pittsburgh team.
it's a joy to be with all of you today. Today, we're actually going to be talking about self-esteem and loving ourselves, right? How can women and men deal with self-esteem issues and learn to love who they are? You can find that out in today's discussion. So I think it's appropriate to start off this conversation with the topic of identity. And I think it seems a little bit off, maybe not kind of tuned into the topic of self-esteem, but it makes a lot of sense. I just remember last year in the summer, actually, after I finished my first year with the Culture Project, exiting out into the summer break, I was really experiencing a lot of loss when it came to my identity as a missionary. I realized at the end of the year that I had hooked on my identity to the title of missionary, right? And when that was gone, I kind of started spiraling down. Everything about my life, my self-care, my emotional life, my relationships, and I really felt the strain. And I think it was because I forgot that my identity should be rooted in my daughtership, or if you're a man, in your sonship. And we oftentimes, I know you know this, we hitch our identity to what we do, to our social media, right? How many followers we have, or our economic status, our academic success, or any relationship that is in our life. And it doesn't really make sense, because the thing is, God is our only constant. And it's really interesting. Self-esteem in the psychology world is defined as a term that is used to describe a person's overall sense of worth or personal value. In other words, how much you appreciate and like yourself. And it's often seen as a personality trait, which tends to be stable and enduring. But we know, right, as people of faith, as people that know this greater truth about ourselves, or that are trying to dive into this greater truth about ourselves, that our sense of worth comes from God, because we're made in His image and likeness. And if we place our worth on anything else, that I mentioned prior, we will be at the mercy of that thing, because it's always changing. And the only thing that is never changing is God, who our identity comes from. Now, Jenny, can you speak a little bit more about what it takes to know ourselves?
Absolutely. I think first and foremost, it's knowing the gift of who you are. Because believe me, when I tell you, there are too many people in this world who do not know the gift of who they are. They think I'm cool or whatever, or I'm I at this, right? But not recognizing that you yourself, I kid you not, you people watching right now, there's something unique that you bring to the world that no one can replicate. People can try their best to replicate it, but they're not going to be able to do it as best as you can. And why is that? Because there's no one in the world who can rock you better than you. Literally, you're the only one I'm the only one who could be Genesis Gutierrez the best possible. There can be people who try to mimic me, who try to, in which, kudos on them if they want to try that, because I'm cool or whatever. But there's only you're the only person who can rock you better than you. And so in terms of knowing yourself, it's knowing yourself through the lens of first how God the Father sees you. Ask Him in prayers, how do you see me? Because we can be so tied to the ways that people see us in this world, specifically in a negative way, I'm seen as a person who is so goofy, no one takes me seriously, or I'm seen as a person who doesn't have it all together, X, Y, and Z, right? But we want to know the truth of who we are, specifically in the way that God the Father sees us. And then also through the lens of community, the people you surround yourself with, the good people that you surround yourself with, knowing who you are through their eyes. I know a lot of people within Culture Project, especially within the first year of doing mission work with the Culture Project, a lot of reasons as to why it's so moving to do a first year of mission with Culture Projects is because there's a lot of discovery as to who you are. And the reason why, because we're in an intentional community where people are not afraid to compliment the other on the goodness that we see, whether it's like, man, I see your empathy, or man, I see your sacrifice in doing X, Y, and Z, or I don't know if you notice this about yourself, but you think like you're not that smart or whatever, but in moments of despair, you offer such wisdom in terms of advice, like, and being able to be comfortable with compliments again, and like complimenting the beauty that we see in another person, because although the self-esteem and knowing ourselves helps a lot, it also helps to be reminded and affirmed by other people of the gift of who we are. So it's important to be comfortable with compliments and to receive compliments from people, that when people say, hey, I've seen you're amazing at this, to not deflect that and be like, oh, I don't see that, but to allow yourself to receive it and to think, why do I struggle so much with not seeing that? Why can't I picture myself as someone who's wise in the eyes of other people, you know? Because if we don't know ourselves first and foremost through God the Father, then like, what are we doing? Because if we're going to try and know ourselves through the lens of just these titles that we have within the world, it's going to be empty, because when it's 2 a.m. and we can't sleep, that's not what holds firm. The title of being the best at sign language, or the title of being the best at Frisbee, like, who are we to the core, and how does God see us is really, really helpful. So I think that's just some tips on how we can know ourselves, because ultimately no one can rock you better than you. Like, you are the only person who can rock yourself the way you do. And you have a gift to offer the world. Who you are so unique.
Those are such enriching points, Jenny. Thank you so much. And I think being in a pandemic right now and having us all be quarantined is the perfect opportunity to really dive into, the know thyself type of mentality, right? Like, this can be seen as something that is, kind of putting you in a cocoon and like keeping you away from the world, or an opportunity to dive into community in maybe more creative ways. Like you said, seeing yourself through the lens of others, through the lens of God, through your prayer time, whatever it takes to really develop that sense of self-knowledge. Now, can anybody speak to what can we do to love ourselves? And at what point do we know that treating ourselves is healthy? Because I think there is definitely a culture of narcissism and hedonism, kind of seeking pleasure in everything that we do. And sometimes self-care or knowing ourselves can be seen as this selfishness type of mentality. So maybe Brian, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like, when we talk about self-love, I think especially like in the realms of like our faith, that sometimes it could be perceived as just like pride, like, especially in our culture today, that loving ourselves can be far too much of like just being prideful, and we need to have like boundaries and like to have that distinguishing between those things. And so loving ourselves means knowing means like just knowing who we are, that we are sons and daughters of God, right? And so because I know that and want to live in that reality, I need to have boundaries, or just have decisions where like, how can I better love myself and become the person I'm meant to be? And so like what Genesis talked about, like really surrounding yourself with community. Like for me, if y'all didn't know about this, I lived, before I came to Philly to work for the Culture Project, I was living in Houston, Texas, and I have many friends there in Houston. And so a lot of my friends there, like, I wouldn't be the man that I am now without them, because they have challenged me so many times and called me out, but it's to help me become who I am. And so just really for me to surround myself with them, with people to lift you up, to encourage you, it's so, so needed. Because if I felt like if I didn't have them in my life, like, I've been so lost by now. And so just really that's one way for me, like really just to surround yourself with people who love you, and that loving yourself, right? And so, yeah, and again, like it's hard to it's like, even for me, like it's difficult to even separate between loving yourself and pride, because sometimes it can overlap at times. And so, but really just to not understand that, who am I, and why am I doing this for? Like, am I doing this for my own sake, right? or am I doing it to love others and love myself even more in that sense?
Absolutely, and I know for myself, before I was on this journey with God, I definitely used social media to kind of like grasp at attention. I remember one instance, I downloaded an app that used all the filters, all the body modifications. And that was just to point to the truth that I was not comfortable in my own skin. And I wasn't comfortable in like just showing the world who I was. And I think I needed a lot more self-knowledge and to dive into the deeper identity of who I was, right? My daughtership and a daughter of the Lord. And then that's when the humble self-confidence kind of rose about. And that's something that we encourage all of you to do because you're deserving of it. Now, Eric, can you speak a little bit more about like maybe that fine line between self-care and like selfishness, and how do we draw that line? Because we do need to treat ourselves. We need to be able to take care of ourselves, because the truth is we can't pour out what we don't have, right? We need to be constantly taking care of ourselves because we are people that want to like love on others, because we're communal beings. So Eric, can you speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, I would love to. Now that thing that you mentioned is actually something very near and dear to my heart. The idea that we need to be able to fill ourselves before we can outpour into other people. And this is something, especially this summer, as I was preparing for TL training and I was doing all this reading in preparation for this mission year. One thing that I was asked to read actually really struck me, and I forget the book that it came from specifically, but it was talking about in the role of like a leader specifically, or just I guess it can apply really to anyone. The reality that what we outpour is meant to be like an overflow of like the grace and the gifts that we receive from like one, taking care of ourselves, but also feeding ourselves spiritually. So this idea that like, okay, we're not just supposed to kind of like half fill our cup and then pour out that half and then like refill ourselves, but like the truth is we're supposed to be filling ourselves to the brim and let that like excess outflow and like touch the lives of others through our example, through our testimony, through our witness. And just the beauty of that image of like, it's not just, taking care of yourself or like half loving yourself, but more so really taking into consideration all these things, right? Like I deserve to be loved. I deserve to be taken care of. And I can only do that to the extent that I'm actually, I recognize that because I need these things, other people deserve them as well, deserve to be loved, to be taken care of. So as a result, I can only do so much to the extent that I am able to take care of myself. It's just such a striking image. And it's something that I think, I know I struggled with a lot prior to joining the Culture Project and even into joining the Culture Project, where I was working as a youth minister and I felt like I was just pouring out so much, but I never took time to care for myself. I never took time to rest, to relax. If anything came to my attention, it was an immediate, yes, I'll do it, I'll jump into it. And I never really took the time to step back. And I think one of the big lessons for me this year especially is just like taking care of basic needs. It's one of like the biggest lessons that I think so many of us kind of push off to the side. Because while spirituality, while prayer, while all of these things are amazing and foundational and so necessary, there are also aspects of ourselves that we need to take care of just on a practical level, on a physical level. Things like the sleep we get, right? Are we getting enough sleep each night? Like some of us, say we can run on like 4 hours of sleep. And I know I've said that sometimes, but I recognize like it's not true. Like I need the amount of sleep that I get each night so that I can pour out and love the people around me. Am I drinking enough water? Am I eating enough food? I'm a big guy. I'm over 6 feet and like I eat a lot of food, and sometimes I feel guilty about that, right? Like I shouldn't be eating like all this food, and Kiki can attest to that as my teammate last year, just like how well stocked I kept my pantry sometimes. And I recognized that like when I wasn't drinking enough water, when I wasn't eating enough food, when I wasn't sleeping enough, like it hindered the way that I would love my teammates, and it hindered the way that I would even, love my family back home and like all the people that I talk to on a day-to-day basis, because I was tired, I was groggy, I didn't want to participate in things because I just didn't feel like I had the energy. But so much of that came from just that simple, like, I need to take care of myself so that I can fill my cup to the brim and let that outpour. So for me, that just looked like the practical stuff, right? Sleep, eating, drinking water, exercising, which is something that, we have time in some situations for. Like what I had to start doing is I had to stop saying like, I don't have time to exercise. And what I did is I started waking up an hour earlier than I normally do. And I put that time into consideration. So I go to bed an hour earlier as well. And that way I can wake up, exercise in the morning, and then go about my day, because I recognize if I don't do it that way, I won't do it. So just kind of taking care of those sort of physical needs, in addition to the spiritual, and making sure that you're paying attention to the signs of your body, because your body will tell you a lot. And as we know, like the body reveals a lot of truth about us and who we are and where we're at. And so it pays dividends to learn how to like address your body and know like, okay, I'm hungry, I should eat something, right? We talk about, at least with the men, when I give presentations, I talk about the HALT method. So hungry, angry, lonely, tired, like making sure you're addressing those things before you make decisions or interact with people. And by addressing those things, you're loving yourself. And as a result, you're able to love the people around you that much better.
Wow, Eric, preach. I am on the same wavelength as you. We started this next 90-day challenge with international motivational speaker Rachel Hollis, and she talks about the 5 to Thrive, which is exactly what you talked about, you know, water, sleep, exercise, gratitude, good food, and it's all things that are so basic, but we tend to kind of like throw off into the edge, and then we wonder, why is our life in shambles, or why is our self-care routine in shambles? Why can't we like appreciate ourselves or want to spend time with people? Well, it's because sometimes we lose track of those boundaries. And so I would love to hear from a Genesis as to, you know, a little bit more about like the men and women, the similarities into like the way that we take care of ourselves, and a little bit about our differences. Is that possible?
Oh, absolutely. So I think when it comes to loving ourselves, and I think this is overarching for both men and women, is learn to say no, especially when you come from a mentality of a people pleaser mentality. Like I even was speaking to one of my brothers on mission about this. I was like, you know, you're planning this event, right, for our team, and it's based solely on you, right? Things that you like, things that you're interested in. And he was so hesitant about choosing certain things that he really enjoys because he was worried about whether or not it would be received or really enjoyed by the rest of the team. My first thought was like, well, you know what? That's part of loving. Like you sacrifice, you enjoy what another person likes simply because they really light up for it. But then also, just asking like, hey, do you have a tendency to people please? And he's like, yeah, well, I think I definitely do. So in loving yourself and taking care of yourself, it's definitely mindful to be cognizant of when it's appropriate to say no, that you don't always have to be at the disposal of people. You don't always have to meet another person's expectation, especially if it's coming at the expense of your own self-care. So for loving ourselves, that might mean following our gut and saying no, being comfortable with disappointing others in order to make sure that we're not disappointing ourselves, that we're not making sure other people are content, but yet when it comes to us laying in bed, we're disappointed that we didn't follow through with what it is that we needed for ourselves to thrive. And in just being in tune with yourself and what you're feeling, your emotions, letting yourself feel, letting yourself listen to your emotions, and knowing what it is that gives you life. For some people, it's going outside in nature and being just surrounded by the beauty of nature, and feeling a little smaller because you're just surrounded by such beauty, right? For some, it's watching things that they really enjoy, like a favorite TV show. For others, it's exercising. It might be making a really good meal that's not just like a quick meal that doesn't have a lot of health benefits, but spending time making a good, healthy meal. And it might even just be, my favorite, taking a bubble bath with a face mask and having a little bit of wine or beer, and then like making sure I do my pour strips at night, right? Making sure I feel like the best, right? And it's different with everyone, like men and women, it varies, but I think what can be overarching is just like learning to say no when you recognize that you're being run down, and following your gut and being comfortable with disappointing people, because the last thing you want to do is disappoint yourself because you were just trying to please people so much so, but I'm sure the men can speak more to the ways that they live this out, how to practice self-care and self-love, and in ways that they work on their self-esteem.
Absolutely. And just one more thing on the point of women, I was just thinking about this, how women, we have this fine attunement with ourselves, right? With our bodies, which is a great gift from God. And sometimes that can be perceived at the cost of like body image issues. But it also comes with a great blessing of like knowing ourselves in a deeper way, because we're so attuned to our bodies. We can tell when we're tired, when we need, you know, a phone call with a friend, or that bubble bath, Jenny. So yeah, that was just something that I was thinking about. But I'd love to hear a little bit more from Brian on maybe differences or similarities that you think of.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like, you know, there are a lot of similarities between men and women when it comes to like loving yourself, especially in regards to like body images. Like I think definitely for women and men, we both struggle with that. I know personally for me, like I actually don't work out. I know I need to, but I don't, and that's just me being lazy, basically. Yeah, but you know, if I were to, let's say, like walk around like a street, right, and there's like a poster or like an image that shows like a guy like having abs, like I would kind of feel insecure about that because I don't have abs. And I think in our culture, we have these stereotypical narrow mindset of what a woman and men should look like, what the most gorgeous and handsome men and women should look like, right? But in reality, like we can never ever meet to that standard. And so I know like even like in Korea, like they have the highest like I think cases of like plastic surgery procedures. And so like, you know, women are constantly being fed with these lies about like, oh, they're not pretty enough, they're not good enough. And so they have to look a certain way in order to be attractive, right? And it's just kind of like we're buying into this lie that we're not good and we're not beautiful. And so, yeah, personally for me, like I do struggle with body image, and I know a lot of guys do. And I think also too is like I think for guys, it's hard for us to express our emotions, and that when we do feel emotions, we just kind of put it off to the side in the back burner. It's kind of like, whatever. But we don't actually let it process and actually feel those emotions. We don't really listen to the movements of our hearts, right? And so, like for me personally, like, you know, it's easier just to feel numb and complacent rather than to actually feel the emotions, you know? And so, but that's why, like for me, I surrounded my friends, like I have friends who, you know, are guys that allow me to express my emotions to them and to myself to actually feel that. And you know, I think in our culture today, like when guys do express their emotions, it's perceived as like weak, you're a coward, right? Yeah, guys shouldn't cry. But like that's nonsense. Like guys, like we're humans, we have emotions, right? Like, and so we should be allowed to express our emotions. So yeah.
Wow, such great points, Brian. And I love the cultural reference, because a lot of the times our culture does influence like the way that we see ourselves and the way that we take care of ourselves. I know that in the Latino culture, there is this false idea that people who are lighter skinned sometimes are prettier, and that is just a lie. That we must rebuke. The truth is, we are all made in the image and likeness of God, and we are all deserving of self-esteem and self-care because of that. And so with that, I would love, Jenny, to have you speak a little bit more about like loving ourselves, because, you know, love God, God loves us, excuse me. That would be great.
Yeah, I think one thing that definitely comes to mind is just this moment that I had in prayer. I was struggling with like seeing myself as worthy or good, and even just like loving myself in some ways, you know, just being really difficult on myself on the ways that I thought I didn't measure up. And I got in prayer, I was just thinking about how there's certain people in my life who like I would deeply want them to know the ways that I see them, and for them to love themselves. But it seems like it can be so frustrating because it's not seen through their eyes. And then I had this split second of a thought where I thought, maybe that's the way God sees me. Like maybe God sees someone that is so beautiful and worthy of love and just aches and hurts because his daughter doesn't see herself the way that he sees her. And it part of me, like my empathetic heart, was just very like, oh my gosh, that is so sad. that is so sad. Like, I need to be better, because if I feel that hurt with certain people in my life, like, how much more so does God the Father feel that hurt with me when I look in the mirror or when I compare myself to other people and I'm discontent with the gift of who I am? Like, dang, like, God must weep because he sees us as good, as like uniquely made and a unique gift. So that was just definitely something that came to mind. I also got kind of sidetracked in that I kind of forgot your question. So can you repeat it?
That's absolutely okay. That happens a lot in Zoom conversations. But you answered the question. I mean, you totally spoke on how we should see ourselves because God loves us. So that's beautiful. I mean, you called upon the Father, and that's something that we encourage all of you guys to do, to not shy away from God, who is the ultimate source of your identity. So Eric, can you talk a little bit more to our viewers about like practical things that they can do to really dive into this self-esteem, topic, or kind of see themselves as God sees them, their daughtership and their sonship?
Yeah, sounds great. So I think just on a practical level, some of which I've already mentioned, right? Like taking care of the basic needs, like making sure you're on top of your sleep schedule, on top of your meals, your hydration, all these different things, to make sure that like physically you're in some type of balance. That way you're able to really just love yourself in that way, and as a result love others. So I think that'd be like first practical I have just in regards to like self-care, self-love. Second, just building on that, like don't be ashamed to do it, kind of how Genesis was mentioning, and I guess everyone has mentioned at this point, like there are moments where you're going to have to say no, and that is not necessarily because of some underlying cause. Sometimes it is just like, if I say yes to this, I recognize I'm not going to get enough sleep tonight, and as a result tomorrow I'm going to be cranky and I'm going to be upset in my phone calls, in my family life, or all these different things. So taking that time to really like reflect and recognize those moments of like, okay, this is me saying no for the sake of a greater love, and this is saying no kind of in a way like we talk about the virtue of chastity, right? Like you say no, you're like not necessarily just saying no to things, but you're saying yes to love and to all the demands of love, and as a result, you take care of yourself so that you can best love other people. And I think bringing this all kind of to a conclusion, one thing I do want to mention, in addition to like just practical things you can do for yourself, setting aside time for prayer, setting aside time for if you're like a little more introverted to like recharge, if you're extroverted to reach out to friends, things like that, is just the beauty and the gift of how really loving ourselves is, as we mentioned this whole time, meant to direct us outwards. It's meant to help us recognize that by loving ourselves, like loving others is a direct result of that. And I also just want to mention some practicals on the side of that, right? Like the gift that it is to encounter other people and to love other people from all these different points that we've mentioned. And so some of the things I want to mention is just like, if you're in quarantine with, roommates or with your family, like spending intentional time with them, like taking time to take care of yourself and then using that to go out and, as I said, let it outpour into the people around you. Whether it be kind of like our team has been doing with like these flow nights where someone plans something just entirely around what they are doing, like what they are enjoying, and invites other people into that, right? So just spending that intentional time, like having someone in the family say like, hey, you planned something and we're all going to enter into that with you. And then because you're rested, you're able to really just like enter into that and be fully present and excited to enter into that with people. If you are someone who is maybe like quarantining alone, one thing I want to affirm you real quick is like, you're not alone, right? You have our good and loving God who is always with you, who is always listening, and who is always willing to receive you. But also the recognition that maybe there's people that you haven't reached out to in a while. Maybe you have friends or family who are living in a different state or in a different city. Just reaching out to them, taking time to like shoot them a text, like right now, like pause this, you can come back to it, send them a text and say, hey, I haven't talked to you in a while. Like, let's set up a call. I just want to hear how you're doing. And that's a great way to like enter into those relationships with others, and also to affirm their dignity as a result, because maybe they're in a similar place where they're alone and they're struggling and they're trying to figure out like, am I seen? Am I known? Am I loved? And they're struggling to see that identity in themselves of like a beloved child of God. And so you can be that arm, right? That like olive branch to reach out to them and extend that reminder of like, you are good, you are loved. And I want you to know that because I'm here for you. And in addition to that, like you can also just still do things for people. Like, although maybe we're quarantined in different locations, I know I've seen so many different like beautiful things that have happened for my teammates, like their friends buying them flowers and sending them here, and them receiving those flowers, just seeing the joy that lights up on their face, or like writing a letter to someone and like maybe they're not expecting it, you just send it over to them and just like affirming them, as Genesis was saying, like not being afraid to compliment people and affirm them, or even something as simple as like, hey, I'm gonna Venmo you $20 so you can buy, you know, your favorite takeout and have it delivered, so you can just enjoy your night and like rest and enjoy that time with your favorite food. And then I also just want to sort of wrap everything up with the caveat of like, you know, there are some of us who maybe will need a little more support during this time, you know, and I want to say that if you're someone who is really struggling right now, things like therapy, counseling, like these are all beautiful things. And these are all things that can be really, really helpful, especially in a time like this. And so we just want to like cast out any shame, any lies that you may be hearing, both men and women, that like maybe you're not strong enough to handle it, or like you don't have it all together. These are great places to go to. These are great avenues to go to get that help. And it's not something that you should be ashamed to look into. So those are just some practical things on my end in regards to not only loving ourselves, but letting that love, as I said, outpour into our communities, to our loved ones, and to the people who maybe at this time are really needing it.
Beautiful, Eric. Those are all great points. And the one that stuck out to me the most, maybe because it's most relevant in my life, is the power of saying no. Gosh, I'm such a yes girl. And you know, people can call me a people pleaser. I consider myself a yes girl. And sometimes I have a hard time saying no to people because I love them and I want them to be okay and affirmed by me. But I have found in this quarantine, with so many, you know, Zoom calls for work and so many people reaching out, which is a beautiful gift. I have found myself really like kind of treasuring my solitude and like my quiet time. And so I kind of put boundaries when I like talk with people and when I have like alone time, so that I can better be present to the people around me. So those are all great points, Eric. Thank you so much. Now we're going to be transitioning into some of the questions that our viewers have. And the first question that we'll dive into is, how do you balance having good self-esteem versus being full of yourself? Does anybody want to speak to this point?
I definitely want to mention, yeah, this is definitely a struggle, like having good self-esteem, and then also balancing like knowing that no one can rock you better than you, but also not being pompous enough and still having humility to understand, you know, like I'm just a little speck on this earth, right? I think it's just reminding yourself what your feelings are rooted in. Like, am I recognizing the gifts that I have and talents that I have to offer, and recognizing that it is good, but yet I'm not, I can't believe that I'm like the best at it, or not the best at it, but I can't believe that I'm untouchable, right? So I think it's just being introspective in yourself, and being mindful of where your desires are rooted in. Because if there's a sense of pride, this belief of being invincible, and that no one can touch you, and that, you know, like you are the head honcho and like you're the top dog, right? There's good and beauty in knowing what it is that you can do, and the gift of who you are, but to also have humility to know that although you offer something very unique to the world, you are not the source, source and summit. You are not the end all be all, because you're going to come across people who, you know, maybe do things better than you, and that's okay. And when you do come across people that do things better than you, instead of allowing yourself to be hurt by that personally and to take offense and to believe I'm not X, Y, and Z because this person's way better, instead to not let yourself be taken over by jealousy or envy, but to let yourself glorify in the beauty of this person. That, yeah, it's like, I thought my makeup skills were amazing, but when I look at this person, their makeup skills are phenomenal. And I could easily turn into jealousy and to think, you know what, they're X, Y, and Z, but instead to have a mindset of, wow, that's amazing. I can only imagine the work that they have put in to achieve that. Good on them. Good on them for having such amazing skills, right? To not let yourself be overcome by jealousy. But I think at the root of it, again, just recognizing where your desires and feelings are rooted in. If it's a sense of pride that's causing you to be full of yourself, or if it's a sense of humility, which is humility knowing I'm good at X, Y, and Z, and that's okay. It is not bad to say I'm good at something. You're not saying you're the best, but to say that you're good at something, it's not being prideful. You're just laying out truth. That's it.
Wow, Jenny, yes. And I think that you're speaking to humility. Like, what is humility? Like the definition of humility, right? The virtue of humility, living in reality. So living in touch with like who we actually are. And if you are good at like doing makeup, girl, like why not use that to better serve others? So absolutely. Okay, so our next question, what if you have a tendency to feel guilty about loving yourself? Eric, can you speak a little bit on this?
Yeah, I'd love to. This is something that I know I struggled with a lot, especially last year and even into this year. And I'm so thankful for just a loving and supportive community that I've had here with the Culture Project that has really helped me in many ways through this. I mean, I still struggle with it. It's still a genuine battle sometimes, especially now as a team leader, wanting to, you know, do the best that I can for my team. But at times, you know, feeling guilty, like, am I not doing enough? Am I not, you know, present enough? And so I think with this kind of goes back to the understanding of humility, right? Like the peaceful acceptance of reality. And it's something that I think many of us struggle with, especially that peaceful part. Like we can recognize like I need to take care of myself. I'm struggling right now. But it's like the peaceful part gets thrown out because we're like, but no, I can't do that because you know, I should be doing this, or I should be using my time for this, or like X, Y, and Z thing is going on and I'm not present. And so I think really taking a moment to like, I know mindfulness has really been a big thing for me when it comes to this, is just taking a step back and like distancing myself a little bit from whatever is swirling around in my head and just sitting and grounding myself in reality, right? Like, where am I right now? I'm sitting in this chair. I am recognizing that my body is physically tired, that, you know, like, and just kind of taking that time to like take account of yourself. What am I feeling right now? I'm feeling anxious because of this. What else am I feeling? I'm tired. I'm hungry. I'm feeling lonely. And so I think for me, a big step in like learning it's okay to love yourself and it's okay to take care of yourself is that first step of like, I'm just going to stop for a second. I'm going to let my thoughts like dissipate a little bit. And I'm going to jump into like the reality of this current situation, right? Like, am I loving the people around me best by forcing myself to be there and being all pouty and negative and like passive aggressive towards them? Or am I going to live in this reality of like, you know what, this care is so that I can better love the people around me and so that I can be the best version of myself for the sake of those around me. So that's something that was really helpful for me, is just like whenever I felt guilty for taking time to myself, was really stopping and taking into account what was going on around me, how I was feeling. And then even reaching out to like a good friend who knows you well. And one of those people is my amazing girlfriend who, you know, I can tell like I'm feeling really guilty about this, and she'll just be like, Eric, it's okay. Like, relax, take into consideration everything that's going on. Like, you're introverted, you know, you need a little time to recharge. Like, that's okay. and someone to just like speak into reality the things that like I just for some reason can't see in that moment is also really helpful.
Beautiful, Eric. Thank you. Yeah, we love Johnny, your girlfriend. We also love Catholic Mindfulness at the Culture Project. We're a good friend of Dr. Greg Bottaro, who speaks on this and has a book on this. So, okay, on to the next question. So a viewer asked, how about dying to yourself? How does this impact self-esteem? I can speak a little bit on this. So I would say I experienced this tension between like dying to myself and my self-esteem. And I was just, I was contemplating a Bible verse a while ago, and the Lord says, you know, he will humble the exalted and he will exalt the humble. And I think it's so true. Like when we die to ourselves, we humble ourselves in the eyes of the Lord, right? We tell him like, I am willing to serve you because I am your daughter or I am your son. So in that sense, our self-esteem is rooted in truth. Again, like it just kind of circles back to the same truth of our identity. So I hope that helps our viewer a little bit kind of like bring together what this tension like was arising in you, because I know for me it was a real thing. But yes, definitely, I think dying to ourselves should not create a dichotomy between like, you know, being Catholic or Christian and like our self-esteem. It's all one. It should be integrated. Awesome. Our next question, how do you talk to a friend who says things that bring your self-esteem down? Brian, can you speak a little bit on this?
Yes, definitely. So I had this one experience where a friend of mine, we were having a conversation, and she said something that kind of just threw me off and didn't really sit well with me, and it actually did kind of hurt me. But I was kind of afraid to tell her this because I didn't want to jeopardize our friendship. Like I felt like if I were to confront her about this, that'll be the end of our friendship. Like, okay, we can't be friends anymore, right? But I was like, but it really did hurt me, and it was unsettling. And so I had, you know, I knew I had to talk to her. And so I messaged her and was like, hey, can we call at this time? Because I want to talk about something or conversation we had the other day. And she's like, yeah, sure. So we call, and, you know, I just communicate that with clarity, just like, you know, hey, what you said, like it did hurt me. Like it did. And you know what? She responded with such like generosity. She said, oh my gosh, like I didn't know. Like, why you didn't tell me this? Like, I would have said sorry. Like, why didn't you tell me before? And I was like, and you know, because like I thought she would have hated me if I tell her the truth, right? About how I felt. But she was like, no, Brian, like if you feel hurt about what I said, like let me know. So I think we need to be more confrontational to others, like, you know, like this did hurt me. And you know, and if we do confront people, like our friends who like about what we felt when like how people hurt us, right? And they don't change. And that's when we need to kind of like separate ourselves from them. Because we don't need toxic relationships. We need relationships where people do understand us and at least try to understand us and build us up to become better versions of ourselves. Yeah.
Preach, Brian. I love that. I know when I was younger, my family would call me this endearing term that in Spanish is gorda or gordita. And that's just, you know, in English, it's kind of like this endearing term for big boned. And it was so hurtful for me. I think as I grew up, I started realizing that this was really something that I was internalizing and materializing out into my relationships. And I had to put that, you know, boundary that like, I had to tell people that this was hurtful for me. And like you said, confrontation, right? Confrontation is often seen as like something that's very scary. And it should be a springboard into a growing relationship, into a relationship that develops deeper and further. And if you're afraid of confrontation, just call me and Jenny. But yes, that's beautiful. Thank you for speaking into that. So now, what about body image challenges? How would you approach that with self-esteem? So I would say with body image challenges, as someone who has experienced this and sometimes constantly is kind of, you know, pushing back to the lies that sometimes the devil wants to have me live through, having your girl gang or your guy gang around you to really lift you up and have no shame in calling a girlfriend and telling her, you know what, I am struggling with this. And can you just speak truth to that? I know a lot of us can just think of those friends that we can probably count them, you know, on the palm of our hands, that really bring us light and that lift us up, right? Because that's what good friends do. We lift each other up. Does anybody else want to say a little bit more on this? We can always comment a little bit later. So now the next question, how can you tell if you place your self-worth in your abilities or your looks? Jenny, can you speak a little bit more about this?
Can you all hear me
Yeah.
pretty well? Okay, awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, honestly, when it comes to how you can tell if you place your self-worth in your abilities or looks, how do you respond when you don't have the time to put the effort into your looks? And how do you feel when that's the case? Like, say for example, I know I know like 2 years ago, I rarely would I be caught dead outside without my makeup on, or at least doing my eyebrows. And if I was out, I believed that I was kind of like under the radar. Like no one really noticed me. I was kind of invisible. So I thought it was a cool thing. I was like, you know what? I get to go to the store without makeup on and no one really notices me or gives me a second look, right? Because I'm kind of invincible and invisible. But I think definitely I recognized in that I was like, wow, I'm putting a lot into my looks. Like I believe that I'm only truly seen when it is that I put on makeup and where I look my best, what I believe is my best form, my best self, right? And so I think it a true testament as to like how you're able to tell if you place so much self-worth in your looks or your abilities is when that ability or skill is hindered or compromised. How do you react? Is it out of anger? Do you feel like a part of your identity is taken away? Do you feel like, do you feel like this inability to move past it? Or even just when you don't have the time to put that much work into, your looks and whatnot, like how do you respond? So like if the response is not that of just being able to accept it and move on and take it on and accept it as reality, then that definitely is a stark indicator that you place a lot in this. I mean, and this is easily seen with athletes, like when they get into a serious injury mid-season, their response, if it's anger, sadness, or just like being upset, like it's because odds are, they put a lot of their identity into that, or they just put so much of themselves in that now that ability to play that sport is taken away, they feel like a part of them is taken away. So I think that's just a clear indicator.
Those are such great examples, Jenny. Thank you so much. So we have a few minutes for 2 more questions, and I think this next question is so appropriate for one of the men. So I'd love, Eric, for you to touch on it a little bit. How do you guys talk about self-esteem? I know girls sometimes do with each other. If you're a guy who struggles with self-esteem and loving yourself, what can you do?
Yeah, this is a very real question and an important question. I think when it comes to men, one of the big things that kind of Brian touched on earlier was just the reality that we're often not encouraged to share these things. I know growing up, I struggled so much with self-esteem, with body image issues, with all of these different aspects of myself that I just didn't like. And I even wrote about it I've healed a lot of those wounds since. But I kind of told some of my teammates or written about it in some of my blogs, like in the past, even something as simple as like the video games I would play, I would never name my characters after myself because I just didn't see myself as these like heroic or like, just kind of standout guys. I would always base it off my friends, off the things that I liked about them more. And comparison was a real struggle for me. And so when it comes to this topic of self-esteem, I think it's something that guys unfortunately don't talk about enough. And one of the big things I want to mention for all the guys out there watching is that first and foremost, you're not alone. Like you're not the only one who struggles with this. There's so many guys out there who to this day are battling with these issues of self-esteem and self-image. And I know for me, a lot of it stemmed from, especially like in the Hispanic culture, that machismo, like you're not supposed to show emotion. You're not supposed to show that it's too much. You're not supposed to, like crack in any way. You're supposed to be this firm, like unwavering individual. And I go back to this talk that I heard where this woman was talking about this research that she did with like working men specifically, and how this man came up to her and talked about how, like, he's like, my family would rather see me die on my white horse than show any emotion or show that I'm cracking. And that just struck me so hard, because I'm like, no, like, your family needs you to show that. Your family needs you to be there for them. And even with men that I've talked to, like giving presentations out and about, like, I have so many men come up to me and be like, thank you for saying that we can feel. Like, and I'm just like, it's crazy to think that no one told you that, like, that you're allowed to feel, you're allowed to process your emotions. And just an encouragement I have to all those guys out there is like, find a good group of brothers, like men who will lift you up, who will challenge you to come out of yourself, who are not afraid to see you in those moments of difficulty, and who will lift you up and encourage you along the way. Because I know for me, like, finding a good brotherhood is one of the things that changed so much of my life, and even just a good community in general. Like, I remember last year, one of my teammates just coming into the room, and her, like, kind of just this joke she made, right? She's like, I'm so tired of men. And she kind of paused for a second, and we're all like, wait, what did we do? And she's like, of men not recognizing how good they are. And I was like, oh, okay, this is a completely different thing. But just like finding a good community of people who will tell you and remind you, like, it's okay. Like, we're here with you. We're in this with you. We're all battling this together. And breaking this, especially amongst men, and I think amongst everyone, to be completely honest, of like this individualist mindset of like, we have to be better than the person next to us. We have to be above the person next to us. So we can't show them any of that weakness that we're currently experiencing, because people are going to use that against us or something like that. And so when it comes to men, especially, like, we got to stop this competition, this constant, like, trying to one up each other, and really look to form strong brotherhood with like men who are going to, as I said, lift us up in those times of difficulty, and who are not afraid to talk about these things. And if you're struggling to find men out there who are willing to talk about these things, like, one of the beauties of that challenge is like, maybe you're recognizing it and other people are afraid to talk about it. So what you can do is like, you can start that ministry. Like, why can't it start with you, right? Like, I know so many amazing men's groups just here in the Diocese of Pittsburgh that we've been invited to, that are doing this, right? That are keeping each other accountable, that are talking, that are sharing, that are being honest with each other. So that is my encouragement to you. Find a community. And if you don't see that community, I bet that there's people out there who want to be a part of it. So get it started, reach out to people, and know that it is okay to talk about it, because you're not alone.
Beautiful, Eric. Thank you so much. Now, the last question is more tips on supporting someone who struggles with self-esteem and affirming their goodness. So I'd like to say something really quick. I remember in 5th grade, my 5th grade teacher had us do this ritual that seemed pretty weird to me at first glance, but then I realized, wow, this is so healing. So she had us write in little pieces of paper all the things that we didn't like about ourselves. And little did I know that, like, now at my age, 28 years old, I would look back to that moment and find it to be so pivotal for me. I remember in one of the little papers I wrote down that I hated my arm fuzz, because, you know, sometimes curls can be hairy. So I hated it, and I wrote that down, and I like crumpled up the little paper and I put it in a trash can, and then we basically like lit the trash can, well, not the trash can, but the papers in the trash can on fire, symbolizing that those things were lies, right? And so that's one thing that I really just encourage people to do. Not exactly that, but like, find whatever ritual you think would help you in just rebuking those lies that you're living out about yourself and your self-esteem and your goodness. Anybody else have anything that they want to speak to regarding that? Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, again, like, this whole comparison narrative, like, really, if you struggle with self-esteem and especially struggle with like comparing your stuff to other people, because for me, like, when I was in college, I struggled with so much with like my major, because I didn't know what to do with my life. And I saw other people, my peers, graduating and doing these spectacular things. And I thought like I was the failure, like, you know, like I'm the black sheep of the family too, right? But really like there is no expiration on your goals and expirations on your happiness, right? And really that from really through prayer and through community that I learned that the Lord is not asking me to walk from A to Z. He's asking me to walk from A to B. Take it day by day, you know, and to learn and to know that you're not a problem to be fixed, you're a person to be loved.
Wow, you're not a problem to be fixed. You're a person to be loved. I'm gonna put that on my wall. Thank you, Brian, for that. And thank you, everybody that's been watching. That's about it for today in regards to questions. You can go ahead and post more questions down in the comments below, and we'll make sure to answer them after this video. Thank you all for tuning in today, and I hope you enjoyed our conversation. Please join us tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern Time as we continue our live session with Koji and Randall. They're fabulous. They actually look like twins in my eyes sometimes. They will be doing a Q&A session, so please join and ask any questions that you may have. During this time, the mission of the Culture Project lives on. It lives on. Consider making a donation today at thecultureproject.org/donate. As you can see, you know, we're all here just trying to pour out into you guys because we believe that you're worthy of this. So thank you so much for tuning in and submitting your questions. It was a gift to be with all of you. See you next time.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Adios.